Hi, we're really excited today to introduce two of our graduates of the Indigenous Trauma and Resiliency Program at the Factor-Inwentash Faculty of Social Work. And we're moving now towards a lot of what Michael and Kris were talking about, a conceptual level and what this means, at a molecular level and, within inside of ourselves and our spirits. And this also has the realities of working on the front lines and also what this means when we're working with our families who are working through these systems that have been ingrained and infused through colonialism, and how do we position ourselves and work both within, alongside, and to better the experiences we have in life. So maybe we haven't talked about this. Lisa, I'd like to start with you. If you'd like to just introduce yourselves, talk a bit about yourselves and your work.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Robinson. I'm speaking to you from the west coast of Vancouver Island, Nuu-chah-nulth territory. And I'm from the Heshquit First Nation, married into a Howzit. But I just want to start by thanking Rupaleen for inviting us to this forum, and also the previous speakers and my mentor, Jane Middelton-Moz, and all of you that are tapping in to bring our energies together to see how we're going to move forward. I really appreciate the work that was done with this book with Kris, Clarke, and Michael, because I believe everybody has a part to play. I don't know how to write books, but like I know everybody has a piece of the puzzle here to help, bringing us back together and helping us to live together peacefully. And so I just really want to appreciate everybody today, because we are in a tough time right now, trying to get through this pandemic. Like we had hit a record high again in BC, 1,300 cases. We're not out of this by, not even close, I don't think right now. So I just want to just say that it's been challenging, but we've been able to get through. I just want to say I graduated from the program through the first cohort with Jermaine and other students. I graduated in 2018 and hit the ground running, right? Using everything that I was able to learn from the ITR program. It was really challenging, and Jermaine could probably, support this, that all we ever heard through the whole 2 years was, we need to clean our basements out, in order to be able to, do that, in order to help people, we need to be clear, and yeah, and I'm also, I guess, wanting to really share, that I am a residential school survivor. I was in one of the last schools that was open, that is now in Tofino, and there was a residential school where they've now put a Best Western there. And when I was listening to, talking about the environment and whatnot, I was in probably one of the most magical places that you could ever imagine, but I was going through hell, as a child. And so all that pain, I didn't have a voice, lost my voice then. And it was really hard to, make any sense of anything at all, and including appreciating the environment I was in. I couldn't connect because I disconnected from the pain that I endured as a child. And so I think it's important, you know, like I really want to acknowledge everybody. I think I know we as First Nations people are going to lead somehow. I know that, I feel it, like, because I believe that we're still really closely connected to those values that we lived by. I was mentored by elders who actually lived in longhouses on the West Coast, and they lived in harmony together. They lived by their values of taking care of one another, you know, sharing, respect. We have our own word for that, which is Isak. You know, we made sure everybody was included in everything. One of our words that we use that talks about, you know, how we're all one is Hishuk Ish Tsawak, which means we're all connected. And what you do to one thing is going to affect everything else. So I really learned to wake those values up as I worked through my own trauma and found my voice, healing from those things that happened to me. And I know it all comes from the historical trauma, the colonization, those words that I didn't know when I was growing up, but I knew I wasn't being treated right, you know. And I think what was the hardest part was it was my own family and community that was treating me this way. So, and I didn't understand that. So I appreciate people that have looked up and kind of put it all together, how colonization has affected us, you know. But I think right now we're really in a crisis, you know, and we need to kind of get moving now. And I always feel that kind of urgency, you know, like, and when I went to get my schooling, I only went to grade 7 because I got kicked out of residential school because I was so bad. I was really a bad kid, according to them, right? But I was just surviving. And so I didn't pursue any education, you know, but I always wondered, how come our communities are like this? How come we're like this? And so, you know, and I didn't think I was smart either in a sense of going to an academic institution. I didn't know, but then I start working through some of my pain, and it's like I realized, oh yeah, I guess I am smart. You know, I even got into law school. I didn't choose that, but I ended up on another path. And so it's been quite a journey, you know, like and I guess because of those values that I was raised with for the beginning part of my life, which I now know attachment is really, really the main thing, right? You need to attach to people and feel that love from someone. And I guess I was lucky because I had my grandparents, you know, and they kept me shielded for the first part of my life, so then I could survive the rest of what I needed to go through. But in that process, I understood values, and of course disconnected from them when I was going through all that pain, but it was not hard to wake it up again once I got through the pain, you know. And so I really work hard every day to live by those values. It guides everything that I'm doing. And so I guess I'll say a little bit about what I'm doing now. There's lots going on. I'm really tired because I work so much, but I work at a family treatment center, Cots Common Family Development Center. You can look it up, and we have a video on there. It'll tell you all about what we do. Work with the whole family system on all of their issues. In the last 10 years, we've been the last stop for many families who say, if you don't go here, we're going to take your children away. So we work really hard to work with these families, and for the most part are successful because most of them have lost their voices too. So it's about helping them to find their voice. And as Jane was saying in the beginning, it's like, it's not what's wrong with you, what happened to you, you know. And so we need a lot more of this kind of work happening because, you know, far too often families are being taken apart still. It's still going on. So we use the model that Jane kind of helped us to understand, you know, in connecting our family and community. We don't just work with the family system, we also work with the outer circle, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our aunties, our uncles. We bring them in also to, you know, work on their traumas and, you know, help them to connect back to themselves so they can connect with their families. And then more recently, the last couple of years, we've been having intergenerational healing gatherings where we have up to 4 generations of residential school survivors and helping them to finally connect, because so many of them haven't spoken, you know, because of the pain that they've endured. And so it's been really valuable, and Jane's mentoring us still as a center. We often call on her when we have some difficult things happening here. And as I was saying, through the pandemic's really difficult. Every week we have word of many more people passing away, not from the pandemic, but from addictions and violence, premature death. So that's getting really tiring. Like I could almost cry about it because I'm so tired, right? And like we can't do enough right now to bring people in. So the last thing I want to talk about and what we're doing in our work here is we started to see the need for helping people to deal with sexual abuse and sexual assault. So for the last couple years, we've been building that foundation to help offenders, victims, and their families to heal from this, because it's such an epidemic in our communities that we need to have places for people to go to heal, you know, and do that deep work. So we're finally at the stage now where we're building our strategic plan and starting to look for funds, you know, to pull this together. And it, believe me, it's not easy either. Like it's a challenge, but you know, I've sort of realized that this is probably the thing I'm going to do till I pass over to the spirit world, is make sure that there's help for people, because that's the open wound that was left. And you know, one of the jobs that I did is I worked for the residential school settlement agreement, and I was a resolution health support worker. And I'd have to go into the hearings with our grandmothers and, you know, parents and listen to their stories, be a witness. So I listened to over 100 stories, and I had to just sit there and listen. And it actually took me out of the game for a while because I couldn't do it anymore. It was so horrible, so horrific. I just, you know, but now I kind of know why. Like it's starting to make sense that I had to hear those stories. I had to understand what happened to our parents and our grandparents, and then how it passed on. And so then we can, as I move forward in the work I'm doing, I have that compassionate way of going forward with this, like that this is a learned thing. One thing I wanted to say, you know, there's all this, you know, people talk lots now about it has to be our way, like our traditional way. And, you know, when I was going away to university, I went and talked to some of our elders, and one of them said to me, he said, when we had problems in our communities, like when we couldn't solve it, we couldn't, find a path, we would send people out to other communities to see if they had a solution. How do we solve this, And so in a way, he was telling me it's okay, go and learn. And so I was so grateful to start to understand some of this other work that's happening. It's amazing what they can see with the brain now and how trauma actually affects the brain. And like you're not a flawed person. This is just your brain surviving, So all of that information, all of that like work by Jane, by Bessel van der Kolk, all these great people that are in the field helping all of us to understand how we're affected when we're not treated or properly when we're growing up, has been amazing, and when I share some of that information with our young families, I've been in here this last week helping with the trauma week, and you could see the relief on people because up until that point, they think there's something really wrong with them, and there isn't, right? They just need to learn, how to find that voice. And the other thing I guess I would say is I agree though that all the work that we do here is based, in the territory we're in the Channel territory, where we use some of our teachings, our medicine, but we also, because of our teaching of sharing and being inclusive, we welcome others, to share what they do. And what I found interesting in the MSW program was so many other Indigenous nations, and Germaine could probably agree, is that, when we did our ceremonies at the end and we presented to one another how much in common we have, like in how those values are so strong, and yeah, some of us are farther away from that root, but that connection to land is just as powerful in Scotland as over here, like that belief in the medicines. And I just found that really powerful, and it seemed like we all come together and people could express themselves with their value system. And yeah, I don't know what else I can say. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Lisa. And you've touched on so many important points, especially what it's like really struggling, right, for these resources and putting our families on the front line, and the toll it takes on us. And what does this mean? What does this mean to live in this and also work in it? It's a real struggle, and with so few of us. So that's where we're talking, right, about building the capacity and the healing, the importance of healing and having our people and our strength. So I really appreciate you sharing more of your personal story, because that's really what we need to more be, being personal and being human with each other, sharing that humanity, and that, this is, yeah, our shared history. And this is where we're at. This is our current reality, as painful and as beautiful as it may be. This is where we're at in all of those things. And I know that yourself and Germaine have worked closely throughout this program. And so with a little bit of time, and you've mentioned the work, Germaine, would you like to share with us a bit about yourself and also how you're working on these front lines?
Miigwech. I'll introduce myself formally. Sakajuwea Pinesi Kwaidishnikasid, Ginabajing Donjaba, Giku Dodem, Anishinaabe Kwayandao. And so my name is Germaine Elliott, and I'm from the Serpent River First Nation. I come from the Fish Clan, and I'm part of the mighty Anishinaabe Nation. So I want to thank all of the speakers before me, who spoke before me. And I want to acknowledge one of my teachers, Jane Middelton-Moz, and my colleague, Lisa Robinson. So she inspired me throughout our 2-year tenure as students at the MSW program at U of T. And we were part of the first cohort for the Indigenous Trauma and Resiliency program. And I went back to school at a very, I would say, late age in my life. But when I seen this program, I just knew that I had to be there. And I did something that I would normally not do, which was jump through a lot of hoops and complete a lot of paperwork to get into this program, because I felt that strongly, that there was something relevant, something unique, and something that would help give the tools for a journey that I didn't even know that I was starting on, but it just seemed right at the time. So I come from a small community in Northern Ontario. I live currently in Orillia, Ontario, and my responsibilities here in Orillia is to guide and provide some, I guess, a bit of oversight to an Indigenous primary healthcare team. And it's a new team, so we're in our 3rd year of operation. But the community that I come from is a small community where everyone is related and everyone knows each other. And it's been one of the blessings in my life to have lived in my own community and to have spent my early years with grandparents. And so a lot of the discussion earlier about, Indigenous ways of being and knowing, that really resonates with me. Like, I was listening to the discussions about how people want to be able to, be in the presence of nature and to learn from that and to feel the beauty of that relationship. And so when I grew up, it was, like I could see how my grandparents were and how they lived their life. But it was in such attunement, not just my grandparents, but like everybody in my community. They're so attuned with the world around them. My grandfather could go out in the morning and know if that was a good day to go hunt rabbits or not, right? And know, my grandmother knew when it was time to plant and when it was, time. It was just so, everything was so balanced. And so I think that was a blessing for me as an individual. But also, I grew up in a time when we did not have social services or programs, right? They were non-existent. And I didn't really think about that until I went back to school. And I was working with other students, and I didn't really give that much thought to social work, even though I'd been in a helping capacity all of my life. But why I'm mentioning it here is because I think that that when people turn to social work, as a career or as a helping profession, it's important to remember that in going into communities, it's never to replace the structures that are already there, right? And so when I think about my role as a helper in any community, it is just that, to look carefully, to listen carefully to the community, to find out where that support and help could be brought in, but not to tell people what they need, right? Or to place outside values on what might be important to a community or a family, right? I didn't realize that till I had actually gone back to school, because a lot of the discussion was around with some of my colleagues were around services, right? Well, we need more services for this, or we need a more programming for that. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but I think we also need to look at those natural systems that exist within communities and find ways to strengthen those systems, right? So much like someone had talked about, and this really resonated with me as well, when we were having a crisis of suicides in the northern communities, or northern First Nations, the first response is to send in counselors or psychologists, who were flown into the community, and then they might stay 2 or 3 weeks and then they leave, right? And that has always been the typical response, at least here in Ontario. And that has never really been very helpful, in my opinion, to the community. It did little to work with the community structures as a whole so that the community could reclaim those natural helpers within the community that could help, that could remember how to care deeply for each other, right? And this is one of the things that I really appreciate about the work that Jane is doing, because it recognizes the need to include whole communities, and also acknowledging the work that Lisa is doing out there in her community. So I just wanted to share that with you. My work right now is in the healthcare, and the healthcare system has got to be one of the most racist systems. I'm tempted to say ever, but I don't want to say ever. But it is a very challenging system to work in, because the views there are so entrenched, and Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous practices are not often respected or acknowledged. So it's a continual struggle to make space. So, Jane had mentioned about, building bridges. And so I do a lot of that. I do a lot of building bridges, but I also walk a tightrope between understanding and listening to the needs of our community, and having to balance all of the pressures of meeting the obligations and reporting requirements of a healthcare system. And the policies are in the hundreds, right, that we have to manage on a daily basis. But I'm really happy with the work that we do here, because we are recognized as an Indigenous team. So we have been given more space than would be typically given. And so we've been able to occupy that space and make more space, so that traditional healing practices are incorporated into everything that we do. We also provide a lot of land-based activities, and just recently have started an equine assisted learning program, so working with horses to help our community members, because everybody is so traumatized by the impact of COVID, by the isolation and the disconnect, which is having a really unhealthy impact on the communities, but also as workers, like as helpers, natural helpers in our community. It's also had an impact on us. So that's a little bit about the work that I do. I have the honor and privilege of working with a fabulous team of really culturally grounded uh, social workers and therapists. And it's a bit of a challenge in working with the clinical team, you know, like the nurse practitioners and the physician, because I think they have to continue to work really hard to accept that Indigenous knowledge is equal to the knowledge that they hold in terms of, you know, Western clinical practices. But we're getting there, so it's a work in progress. So I think that's all that I wanted to share for now, in case there's questions. So again, thank you for this opportunity. Like I'm always so nervous because you know it's a really big deal, right? To speak here on this panel. So miigwech.
And we have another question and moving forward, but Jermaine, just briefly, there's a question here about if you think loneliness and isolation is the cause of despair leading to suicide that you mentioned among your community members.
Well, I'd say loneliness and isolation are part of it. Jane is often says that connection is the correction. And I think that there is, you know, as human beings, like there is absolutely a need for us to be connected with each other, so that when we do find ourselves isolated and disconnected, that has a lot of consequences in terms of not just physical health, but mental and spiritual health as well.
Thank you, Jermaine. And before we move on to reflections about the day, Lisa, would you mind just speaking briefly about what you see are the ways of moving forward in terms of waking up Indigenous memory?
I really do, I guess it's my own belief, but I do believe that, you know, those frozen, like if someone has lived through trauma, like I have layers of trauma, it seems like, and this is just my own, I can't speak for everybody else, but my own feeling is the more layers that are kind of, you know, deactivated, the more human I feel, where like it's like you feel more I guess connected to your spirit. I don't know what it is, like it's and I think that goes for every human being, right? Like we're not the only ones that have trauma, you know, like it's around the world. But my understanding, my own experience is the more layers I have kind of taken off, it's like we naturally go back to that state of, you know, that kindness is really strong. And especially if we've been through a lot, my compassion has grown, you know, tenfold because I have compassion for myself, you know, and that little girl that got herself kicked out and kicked out of the residential school. And I was so angry, you know, like, I just love people that are like that now, because I think, wow, you're making it. And so I believe that, like, our people, it doesn't, the ones that come here anyway, the families that we work with, is like, seriously, you see the transformation as they find their voice and as they find that compassion for themselves, and they in turn, you know, like are able to connect with their children without that shame, right? And that attachment gets really strong, right? So the attachment is number one, right? Like, and we know it got broken in residential school. It's, of course, people always ask me, been doing a lot of interviews lately. I don't know why people are asking my opinion, but I'm like, okay, why don't you guys just really, really, really try to understand the residential school? Like, think about it. Think about what happened, right? Like, think of your own kids, think of your grandchildren, think of what if they took them away? Mm-hmm. What if they took them away from the source of love, right? Not for one generation, but a few. What do you think is going to happen? And then what do you need to do to repair that? You know, how do we need to reconnect and reattach to people, you know? And so of course we have lots of complications from it, but like, it's understandable. I don't think anybody should even be wondering what's happening with us, because look at what happened, you know, generations, you know, and we're just trying to rebuild that connection. And I actually thought I had no hope. I was thinking, oh no, when I learned about what happens when you're disconnected from your family, you're neglected, you're not treated well, and then that doesn't help develop your brain very well, you know, like your prefrontal cortex doesn't get that strong to be able to handle stress. And I was like, oh no, like I had it pretty rough, so I don't know if I'll have a chance to be healthy. But then we know from these neuroscientists that are studying trauma that that part of our brain's always growing, you know, through attachment, through connection, through love, you know. So all these people in my life, and even you, have helped all those pathways get stronger, right? So we all have hope, you know, we all can heal. That's the amazing thing about us, you know. So I think I'll leave it at that.
So it's time for us to move to reflection. So Lisa, those were just incredible words. And Jermaine, thank you both. Really the heartfelt way in which you share the work you're doing and what has brought you here, and even the neuroscience, Lisa, that you brought in to help us imagine the many pathways that allow us to heal. I'm going to invite Michael and Kris back for just a kind of very quick reflection. The reflection that I took from the book, and Kris actually reminded me to look at this. This is from an African proverb, so I'm going to get this wrong. But I'm going to get the grammar wrong, so I'm going to try to read it. So this is a way of thinking about the future. That which will have had to happen. That which will have had to happen. And I know there are many communities that are thinking about the future and encouraging us to dream beyond what we think is currently possible. And I think Lisa's words of hope really take us there as well. So Kris and Michael, would love to give you a minute to just give us a reflection in closing to take away today. Kris, if you'd like to start.
Well, first, again, I'd like to say how honored I am to be among all of you, and thank you for sharing your stories. They really do mean a lot, and they really validate so much of this path I've walked, learning from Michael and thinking about these issues. And I really think, you know, what you highlighted, especially Lisa, about connection and kindness is really important. So much of the evidence-based techniques were learned in the data colonization, colonialism of slicing and dicing people into a million different items of information takes so much away from us as human beings, and makes us lose perspective of what we really should be doing. And social workers are about much more than just random slices of data that we've put into a computer that would generate, you know, decision A or decision B. And I think we need to reassert, you know, what this is all about. Social work is not a new thing. People have done this for millions of years. You know, it's not something that was invented with colonialism. You know, societies knew how to care for themselves, and in many ways much better than the disassociated ways that we've learned. And maybe the challenge for us is that which must have happened for us to survive. And the way of doing that is going back and learning without appropriating, from societies that have, survived and been so resilient for so long, being humble.
And Michael, did you want to share a few reflections?
Yeah, I first of all, again, just like Kris said, thank you to everyone for your presence, for the questions, and especially to you and all the other organizers. It's a really wonderful event. Really learned so much listening to everyone, and looking at the questions too as well. So I think one of the things I've been thinking about is how social work is or has become like the social work or the social services industrial complex, right? It's really kind of what it is. It's, when I think about it, it's that, social work in ourselves has convinced ourselves or convinced policymakers and the rest of the world that we need social work in order for everyone to get healthy and healed. Well, the truth is we need a healthy planet. We need healthy relationships. We need healthy water. We need healthy ways to learn and to embrace and to one another. And I think that's one of the messages of the book, is that if we're going to move towards an integrative healing in social work, we really have to think about how all of these things that not just us in the book, but everyone's talking about in terms of the health of our planet, it really doesn't matter, a whole lot. I mean, from the here and now, unless the comet hits us or the Earth core cracks, and aliens come flying out of there, we're going to survive for at least a generation or two. But, the wisdom of the seventh generation, I think we're responsible for that. We're a very important link to that in what we do and what we teach and how we live our lives. And so, it gets down to when we talked about water, water now is like plastic soup, the ocean. Every piece of fish that you eat, every shellfish that you eat, you're eating micrograms of plastic, right? So this is something we have to be aware of, even though we don't see it. Just like the brain, like Lisa was talking about, I like to look at the brain myself. We don't see trauma on the outside or manifested in our telomeres at the end of our chromosomes or these areas. Trauma in the earth is there. It's pretty clear, and it's human caused. Just like we've caused trauma to one another, we've caused trauma to the earth. And I think in order to move towards this integrative decolonized pathway, it's really important to look at that. It's not just about us. It's about, where we live and who we live with and how we live. So I think it's such an important thing to think about, whether or not we can continue to support a social work industrial complex the way it is, or whether or not we need to break away from that and begin to integrate some of the ideas that we all know that work, like getting back to the land and cleaning up the land, having zero waste, as a goal, and bringing down, CO2 levels by walking more, doing these kinds of things. Social work could be working, toward that kind of thing, rather than getting stuck in the primordial wheel of, dependency upon a public system that we are social workers, to say, rather than let's bring canned foods to people on the holidays that are made from these GMOs, these corporate worlds that have inside lining of BPA that are endocrine disruptors. Why aren't we engaged in social work that helps make edible landscapes, or puts in gardens, or help people return to the land? That to me seems to be, an integrative pathway towards healing. And I think that that's something very important to think about. So
much more. And I think what I love is how both very simple this can be and the complexity that can be wrapped around it at the same time. So I thank you all for joining in this virtual space. I hope the rest of your day is maybe outside a little bit, given everything we've talked about, maybe not as much on the screen. I know there's so many more conversations. So if you can scroll back in the chat, I, with permission, took the last chapter from Kris and Michael's book, which is a discussion guide. For those who don't have access to the book, you can use this. They're really great questions, even if you haven't read the book. So you might have to scroll up on the chat. You can download the PDF. As with everything, there's so much more we can say. Thank you all for staying a few extra minutes. And it's my pleasure to invite back Kris Wasler. I must be saying his name incorrectly, to send us off with a journey song.
It's been my pleasure and honor to be amongst each and every one of you. Some beautiful words, some beautiful teachings. In our Anishinaabe way, there is no word for goodbye. We always say "Bama pi gigwabman," which means until we meet each other or see each other again. So this song says that, and it asks Creator to guide us home to our loved ones in a safe way. And thank Creator for gathering us all together here today. So. Bama pigi wa menan, Bama pigi wa menan, Bama pigi wa menan. Hey ya hey ya hey hey yo, hey ya hey ya hey hey yo, hey ya hey ya hey hey yo, hey ya hey ya hey. Bama pigi wa menan, Bama pigi wa menan, Bama pigi wa menan, Bama pigi wa menan. Hey ya hey ya hey hey yo, hey ya hey ya hey hey yo, hey ya hey ya hey hey yo. Bama pigi wa menan, Bama pigi wa menan, Bama pigi wa menan, Bama pigi wa menan. Hey ya hey ya hey hey yo, hey ya hey ya hey hey yo. Way ya hey ya hey hey yo, way ya hey ya hey hey yo. Oh, Mama P.